I am American. I'm working for the US Embassy in Kigali this summer, and I am in graduate school. So I have written, as I said, many college application essays, and I'm happy to share my knowledge about them with you today. So can everyone see the presentation? You can just give a thumbs up or say yes.
Yes.
Great. So this is day 1 of 4. And so a little about the class. We'll meet 4 times each Friday at this time, 4 p.m. And I've structured it into 3 main topics. So the first one, today's class, is just an introduction to college application essays and getting you overviews of what it's all about, topics, and tips for writing. Next week, we'll focus in on making sure you answer the question, and that's the question that they ask you, and also the underlying questions, what the readers really want to know about you. And our third topic, the last 2 weeks, will focus on different kinds of essays you might have written in the past, and how we actually combine parts of both of these, of persuasive essays and personal narratives, into the college application essay. So really going in on the specific structure and tone of how you're writing this essay. In class, we will hopefully be able to have some discussion, either speaking or using the chat. And we'll have some sample essays to look at, discuss what they did right, maybe what they did wrong, where they can improve. And I will assign homework. There'll be writing assignments so you can start practicing getting drafts of your college application essays. I ask that you submit the homework by Wednesday at 1800, 6 p.m., and you just send it to that email address. And we'll put it in the chat as well. I'm going to ask you if you are comfortable with sharing your work with the class. I would love to use your writing as examples. I will not say whose it is. I won't say, oh, well, this is Eric's essay. We'll just have an essay with no name. So if you are okay with that, let me know when you turn in your homework to say you can share this or please don't share. Are there any questions before we start discussing essays? Okay, well, if you come up with questions, again, you can put them in the chat or just raise your hand, unmute, ask away. So, college application essays. So when you're applying to university in America, you're going to fill out the Common Application. You've probably heard of it before. Many of us just call it Common App because we're lazy. And the Common Application, it sends all of your information, your grades, your test scores, your essay, to all of the schools that you want to apply to. And so you're writing this one essay for the Common App that all of their schools will be reading. The Common App gives you many questions to choose from. I think there are 6 questions, and then the 7th is whatever you want to write about. It's a 650 word limit, and the focus is on you and your personal qualities. Right? This essay is going to all of the schools you're applying to. So you shouldn't write about one specific school. The focus is on you. Each school wants to learn about who you are as a person and what kinds of qualities you will bring to their campus. When you're applying for college, some schools might also ask for specific essays. So they'll have their own extra assignments. And those essays will have a different subject, maybe why this school, or more personal fit questions, seeing if you match the school culture. But the overall rules for writing the essay, so how to write the essay, what kind of vocabulary, what kind of qualities you're trying to bring out. These are all the same as the Common App essay. This course will focus on the Common App essay, but the things you'll learn, you'll be able to apply to those other essays as well. So the Common App, this college essay is also called a personal statement. And it's called that because, as I said, it's supposed to showcase you as a person. So it's a chance to show your writing skills, but even more importantly, it's where the only place on the application where your voice shines through. It doesn't need to be about a major or dramatic event in your life. You can, if that's something that has really shaped you as a person. But it can also be about more day-to-day life, small things that you find meaningful. The point is to show off your positive personality traits and tell the readers about what motivates you. So, for example, my friend Sarah, she got really good math scores, but she also sings really well. And so obviously there's no tests that show that she sings. But singing is really important in her life. She sang in church choir, she sang in school. And so that was really important to her. So she wrote her essay about singing and how she had met all these people through singing and how they helped her move forward in life. So, right, the essay is showing this other part of her life, something that is really important to her and that you wouldn't see in other parts of the application. Another example, Dylan and his ducks. Dylan wants to study business in college to help his family farm become successful. And so he decides to write his essay about his work on the family farm, where he takes care of the family's 100 ducks. What personality traits could Dylan's story show? Why would he write about ducks? What could this tell us about? What does the story tell us about who Dylan is as a person? And if you have ideas, can you put them in the chat, or you can unmute and just say what you think.
Victoire, we can't hear you clearly.
Connection.
Great. Does anyone else have ideas about what personality traits Dylan's duck story could show? What do you know about someone who works on the farm every day and takes good care of their animals? Yeah, someone said hardworking. What else do you know about him? Yeah, leadership, commitment, discipline. These are all great. Is there anything else? Any other ideas? Yeah, responsible. Yeah, so you see this one story about Dylan's daily life. It's just ducks. And the way he writes his essay, he shows the readers that he is hardworking, he has commitment, he has discipline, he is responsible. Yeah, he has concern for others other than himself. He cares about his family, he cares about animals. And so in this one story, we see that Dylan seems like a good person and he sounds interesting. And so that makes the reader think, yes, we want to know more about Dylan. Dylan would be a good student for our school. So here is a list of all the official Common App prompts. So these are the 7 questions that are given on the Common application for your essay. As I said, you choose one, and then you write your essay based on that one question. And these are the same 7 questions that they have used for at least the last 5 years. So the chances are they will use them again this year. So if you want to, so you could start writing now. And you notice there's a wide variety of topics. It's really leaving it open up to you. Like some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent so meaningful to you. Did someone have a question? All right, so, or reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. So this is, again, looking into your personality, how you think. Are you good at logic? Are you flexible? Right? Bringing out, it's this opportunity to show all these different your personality traits. So now we'll go on to the writing process. So we were talking about the contents, and now we'll go on to the process of how to write. So the first step, obviously, the first step is to brainstorm. And I actually listed this before choosing your topic because, right, we have so many options that for me, it was easier to, so it's best to think through each topic to see which one will show you, maybe the best way to show you. So actually you should brainstorm a bit before you just choose a topic. And I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And before we move on, I just want to check again, are there any questions? Okay. So as I was saying, the writing process. So the Common App gives you 7 choices. How do you know which topic to choose? Brainstorm. So write down little bits, maybe think about which topic really speaks to you. What topics do you have the most to say about? And that will help you choose your topic. Then once you know what you want to write about, start outlining. So that's coming up with how can you tell your story? What personality traits do you really want to bring out in this? Is there a lesson to be learned? And then of course, write. Write your essay, write an essay, even if you think it's bad, it's better to have something because even if you're like, this is not a good draft, there will be certain parts of it that you can use, and you'll have at least all your ideas out to start with. And another good idea is to reread your work and have others read your work too, to help find, not just to find mistakes, but maybe they look at it and they say, what if you put this section here? That makes the flow better. Great question. So when I say brainstorming, I'm referring to what kinds of ideas that you want to write about. So thinking of brainstorming is like coming up with ideas for your essay. So when you're thinking back how to answer the questions, think do I have a life experience that matches this question? Like, did I ever really think and challenge something? Or you think maybe there's a question about values, so you can go through list your values and select the top 3 to find like what is really important to you, something really important about you. Another idea for brainstorming to come up with ideas, you could make a list of details from your life, some interesting facts that describe a part of who you are, and then think of how can you bring these together, or maybe looking at these facts about you like, oh, I have all of these skills and they're all parts of communication, or I learned these skills as part of this group when I was volunteering for this group. So I can write my essay about that volunteering because this reveals all these things about me. So brainstorming is just the process of you thinking of ideas and writing them out, all the possible ideas. So that way you know you have an idea of where to start from and you have many options to choose from for what you might want to do. So let's do a little practice right now. So I have put, we have 6 topics. Some of them are values, some of them are things so here are 6 topics. And for each one, I want you to think about how this has played a role in your life. If it's a personal skill, is it something that you have or something that you wish you have? Or maybe it's something that doesn't exist in your life and you want it. So let's start with wealth. What does wealth mean to you? And again, you can type things or you can unmute and just talk. So I can't hear you when anyone talking, but yeah, feel free to type in the chat what you think of when you think of wealth.
Anybody else? Do you have any thoughts? What comes to your mind when you think of wealth? Money, okay. Other ideas?
Money, luxury, a lot of cars. Yeah, so when we think of wealth, we think of money. And yeah, and other ideas that come with money, power, freedom. What role does wealth or the absence of wealth play in your life? So I know people who have written essays about working really hard. Their parents did not have much wealth, but they wanted to go to college and succeed to help them and bring wealth to the family, to make everyone's lives better. But we could also think of wealth not just as money, but we could be wealthy in other ways, rich in other ways, rich in friends, rich in family, rich in community. So if we expand our idea of wealth, what then?
Kiana, was your question, what else one thinks of when they think of wealth, but besides money per se?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, because wealth literally means money. Wealth can also mean having a lot of something. If you have a lot of friends, you could be wealthy in friends. So things like, yeah, wealth, peace, joy, peace of mind, freedom of speech. If these are ideas that are important to you, then from one word, from the starting from wealth, you could write about your essay about peace, how you seek out, maybe you're seeking out freedom of speech, or you want to help promote that in your country. Maybe you want to bring peace of mind to you and your family. How can you do that? If college is the way to do that, that's a start to your essay right there. Let's look at another word. Communication. What role does communication play in your life? How important is it? So what do you think about communication? What does it mean? Is it important to you? So communication can resolve conflict. We talk about things, we solve our problems. Or communication as a door to opportunities. You talk to someone, you find out about something new that you could do, or maybe you realize that they have similar ideas and you can work together. So communication, right now we have two ideas from communication: resolving conflict, opportunities. Both of those could be the start of an essay. How have you used your communication skills to find new opportunities? Or have you used your communication skills to resolve a conflict? And that could just be anywhere from maybe helping your family get along better, getting your friends to stop fighting. So again, things you can tell stories about from your life to show these ideas. Yeah, sharing different views, different life experiences. And so you could write your essay about communicating with people, learning to communicate better, and learning about other people's lives, sharing these views. So you see, we start with just one word, and it becomes, when we think about what this means to us and what role it plays in our lives, you start coming up with more ideas for how to write about your life and what this means to you. Are there any questions about brainstorming or coming up with essay ideas? Okay. And and before we move on, I want to say thank you so much. All of these ideas in the chat are excellent. You're all doing great. So the next important step in writing, after you have brainstormed, after you have, identified personality traits and values that are important to you, we wrote about them, we thought, what does this mean to us? What role does it play in our lives? Now it's time to outline. So think about, is there a story or stories about your life that you want to tell that show this value or that show these values? Right? If you have a story about using communication, or maybe you have two stories, now you have those. So when you outline, you want to organize the list of points that you want to make. So how should you tell these stories? In what order? Does it make sense to go for first this happened and then this happened? Or maybe you want to organize your stories around themes. So first a story about how you showed communication, and then a story about telling the reviewer about what was important to you and what wealth means to you. And something to keep in mind as you outline is, what is the main point or message, right? Because you're telling these stories about your life, but you want it to be clear that we want to use these stories to show these values and your skills, right? The stories will show people that you are responsible, that you can communicate well. So you want to make sure you have all of the points that you want to make in your outline so you don't forget anything important, but make sure that there isn't anything extra, right? Dylan is telling a story about his family and the duck farm. He doesn't need to talk about his math scores. Those are on a test. Those are not part of the story about the farm. So just making sure that the things on your outline are working towards your main point. Are there any questions about outlining? Okay, so when you're writing your draft, many people will say the most important part is the introduction and the conclusion, where you start and where you end. And this makes sense, right? When the way you start your essay, that's what gets people's attention. That's what tells them what you are writing about. And so you want it needs to actually communicate to people the topic of the story. Otherwise, they will be confused. And it should be interesting because otherwise, why would they want to keep reading? Your conclusion is also important. This is the end of your essay. You don't want your essay to just stop and the reader thinks, oh, what happens next? You want your conclusion to bring things back to your goals and aspirations and really answer that question. What do you want the readers to learn from your essay? So going back to Dylan and his ducks. For an introduction, he could start two ways. It says, I want to study business so I can expand my family farm. This is true. This is Dylan's plan for college. Or what if he starts his essay by saying, the first person I say hello to every morning is not my mother, but my favorite duck, Gracie. Which sentence is more interesting to you? Which is more exciting or intriguing? Yeah, the second one. The second one is interesting. Like, oh, a duck. What's happening? You want to know more. And then Dylan can continue and explain about his farm. And now we have this opening that caught your attention, that makes the reader want to know more. And he's introduced the idea of the farm and that he is committed, right? Because this sentence also tells us a lot about Dylan, because he starts his day with work. So already at the beginning of the essay, we see that Dylan is committed and hardworking. Dylan, the sentence, I want to study business so I can expand my family farm. Dylan could use this sentence in his essay, but should he use it at the start or at the end? So should Dylan tell us about his plans to study business in college at the start of the essay or at the end? All right, Divine says at the end. Does anyone have any other ideas? Okay, resume things at the start. Okay, we have one person saying at the end and one person saying at the start. Why would it be good for Dylan to tell us about his business plans at the start? Why do you think he should do that? Any ideas? And this is a question for anyone in the class. So if you agree with them, maybe you can say why you would put it at the end or at the start. Okay, so I see I have confused everyone and no one is quite sure where to put this sentence. Well, so I personally would put this sentence at the end, but I would introduce the idea of business earlier in the story. So Dylan can start the story by talking about working on the farm, but he should continue the story by bringing in other ideas like what does he want? Where does he want to go with this? Does he want to stay on the farm forever? If he does he think the farm is good enough or does he want it to expand? And so this way we see step by step how Dylan develops his ideas and comes to the conclusion that he should study business because that will be the best way to help the farm. So I personally would end the essay with him deciding to study business so we can continue working for the farm. But you're right that the overall ideas should be introduced earlier. Yeah. So the business is the conclusion. The business is the end goals and aspirations we're bringing back so it's clear. Right? The readers will learn at the end that Dylan is hardworking, he's responsible, and he's committed to the farm, and that going to college will be the best way to reach those goals. Yeah, so Rosine said to put at the start for the introduction. And you're right that it is important to introduce yourself and your ideas. But we already agreed that the very first sentence of the story should be more interesting, right? We decided on Gracie, the second sentence, to catch attention. And so if we're beginning, we're telling this story, Dylan is telling the story of his life about the farm. And the goal is to connect from the story about the farm to business. And so since this is something of a journey beginning at the farm and getting to business and college at the end, it's okay to put business at the end. The schools will know what you're applying for, so you don't need to remind them at the start. It's more important in your essay to tell a story about your personality, again, your personal traits, what positive qualities you have. Are you driven? Are you compassionate? And then that's what's going to, when they come to the conclusion of your story and Dylan says, so in conclusion, I want to study business so I can expand my family farm and continue helping all the animals and my family. Now the reader knows, well, Dylan is a hardworking person. They're committed to the farm. You know what? I agree. This is a good plan. They should study business at my school. Does that make sense? Are there any questions about why we would put business at the end? Awesome. So the last thing I'll say about introductions before we go on is, when should you write your introduction? You may be thinking, Kiana, what a silly question. The introduction comes at the start. Of course, I'll write it first. And that works for a lot of people, but you should always, when you finish writing your essay, go back to your introduction. Is this still the most exciting thing to write? Does this really a good beginning? Or when you're reading your essay, do you realize that you started your essay by saying, I want to study business, and maybe that should go at the end instead? I personally, sometimes I write my introductions first. So I start writing an essay and I write, okay, here is the main argument of the essay, what I want the reader to learn. But then when I finish the essay and I go back, I realize, well, this is what I want the reader to learn. Maybe this should be at the end. And so I go back and I write a new introduction that has that catchy thing introducing the ideas. Maybe you don't start writing with saying the first person I say hello to every morning. Maybe you start when you first write your first draft, you say, okay, I want to study business. and then tell the story of the farm. But then go back and make sure that is this information in the right place, or maybe should you move it to the end? So that's part of the writing and rewriting process, right? It's okay, right? And that's why I said earlier, it's okay if your first draft, you look at it and you think, oh no, this isn't very good. Because maybe you just need to put your ideas in a different order. Maybe you have everything that you need, except now you realize you want to have a catchy introduction, so you can go back and write that. So don't be worried about not having a good, catchy introduction the first time, but make sure you go back and when you rewrite, and now you can add these things. So the whole editing process, right? Draft, read your draft, and then come back and again, and that's especially the good time to check your introduction and conclusion and think, is this answering these questions? Is my introduction catchy? Is it giving the main theme? Is my conclusion bringing it back to the goals and aspirations? Any last questions about introductions and conclusions before we go on? Okay, so some tips and things to avoid as you write your story. So again, you're telling a story, right? A story about a part of your life that shows parts of your personality, shows the personal traits, your strengths, your ambitions, your dreams that you really think are important for them to know. So the first question is, how much detail is too much? If Dylan is telling the story about his duck farm, he needs to tell us something about the farm, but how much should he tell? Does Dylan need to tell us how he feeds the ducks? Does he need to tell us how much he feeds the ducks? Yes or no? Yeah, probably not. Dylan does not need to say, well, I feed the ducks this mixture of grain and corn. Does that tell us that a good thing about Dylan? No, it just tells us about the ducks. So when you go back as you're writing, and especially as you're editing, maybe think, how much detail is necessary? What if Dylan wants to tell us? What if Dylan wants to show that this is a big responsibility, that taking care of the ducks is really hard work, and he wants us to be impressed? So if he wants to tell us that, should Dylan write about that he has to, I don't know, feed the ducks 3 times a day? Would that help his story? Yeah. So that detail, that he has to feed the ducks a lot, and that he does it very well, this is a good detail to show because it emphasizes a good quality about him. So as you go through your story, think about, does this detail help tell people something about me? Or is it just something that I know? And that goes into the next part of, you don't have to tell your entire life story. So you don't need to say, I was born in Kansas on a hot sunny day, and my mother drank 3 glasses of water and cried. You don't need to tell that part. It could be a good story, but it's not really about you. That story about my mother does not actually tell you anything about me. You want to stay focused on the prompt. If Dylan's telling us this story about how he works on the farm and he balances that with school and his commitments, he doesn't need to tell us about fighting with his sister. He doesn't need to tell us about a field trip unless it works with the story. So Dylan's school went on a field trip to the city. Should Dylan tell us about the field trip? If Dylan's school went on a trip, so it was they drove into the city, they visited the government building, and then they drove back. Should he add this to his story about his farm and his ducks and his plans for business? He had a lot of fun. He really liked the trip. Does it help his story? Rosine, why do you think he should add it to his story? What does the school trip tell us about Dylan? Or does anyone agree with Rosine that Dylan should write about the school trip to the government offices? Or does anyone disagree? And I'll remind you about his trip in the chat. So Dylan's school they went to the city and they visited the state government building. That's a really good point, Blaze, if what he is writing about is related to the school trip. So if the school trip is to government buildings and all they did was learn about the history of their country, is that trip related to Dylan's plans to study business to help his farm? No, it's not. Yvette, why do you agree? What does it show? Yeah, so Casimir has made a good point, and Rosine is also making a good point. He should only talk about the trips that are related to his topic. So if Dylan's trip is to the government offices and they just say, here is the history of our country, that doesn't really relate to business. It doesn't relate to Dylan's farm. So Dylan should not write about that. But what if Dylan goes on another trip and that one goes to business people who sell things from farms? Would that be something to write about? Or if the passion for the farm started on a trip he took? Yes. So if the trip connects to the farm, then yes, you would write about it. If the trip is on a different topic, no. So it's important to stay focused on the prompt and make sure that the story all connects. So as we said, if Dylan's trip, they visit business people who work with agriculture, that maybe that's where Dylan thinks, oh, I should study business because this will help the farm. Then he should definitely talk about the trip. He should write about it in his essay. But if the trip is about something else, if the trip is about history, then even if Dylan enjoyed the trip, he should not talk about it. So just make sure you stay focused on the prompt. Yeah, if he visited a farm where they use new technology, that's a great trip to write about, that to include in his story. So it's all about how it relates to the topic. And the last tip is to not be afraid to talk about your culture or other personal things. The essay is the one chance you get where you can really be a person and not just test scores. So write about what makes you who you are. If your family, maybe your family has a ritual, there's certain holidays that you celebrate in a special way, and that's really important to you, go ahead and write about it because that's something special to you. And that makes you, that's interesting. That's much more interesting than just knowing that, I don't know, you got a 95 on a math test. The essay is that point where is the place where you can really talk about things that are special to you, that are unique to you. And this is also important because what college recruiters are looking for, what the people reading your essay is looking for, is not just someone who has good test scores, but someone who will be a good addition to like the student body as in terms of diversity, in terms of culture, in terms of new ideas, different experiences, right? Because if you have a school and everyone in the school is exactly the same as you're all thinking the same things. There's not going to be very much new ideas. So the school wants to have people from different places and different backgrounds and with who are interested in different things. So it's great if you talk about that in your essay. You need to connect it to you. You can't just say write an essay about, I don't know, your hometown, because that's a place, not you. But if your hometown helped make you who you are, like the people in your town helped you become a better communicator, or they taught you important life values, then that's something you can write about, and that's good. So are there any questions about details, what trips to write about or not to write about, or anything else that you may or may not put into your essay? Okay, so we have, I believe, about 5 minutes left. So the homework for this class will be to write an essay. So for the format, no, it does not have to, what you need to have is an introduction, a middle section, and a conclusion. You do not have to do 5 exact paragraphs. You might end up with 5 paragraphs, but it does not have to be strictly 5. What I want you to think about instead is how can you tell a story or maybe several stories that show that answer the question and show these, maybe your values or your strengths, and end with your goals. So maybe if you have 2 stories, then you would have an introduction and then two stories and then your conclusion. Yes, the due date time is in Central Africa time. Yes. So I'm putting these instructions in the chat. And again, remember, you're telling a story about yourself, or maybe a few stories. And then introduction, the stories, and your conclusion. Are there any other questions about the homework or about essay writing? Okay, so before we finish, since we have a few minutes left, so again, yeah, if you have questions or comments, go ahead and say them. If you don't, maybe start thinking about these prompts. If we're talking about a time where you had to take a risk or stay safe, what kinds of personal qualities would this bring up? Is this a successful story? If it's not, then what did you learn from it? The word limit is, we'll say 650 words, just like the Common App essay. But you do not have to write a full 650 words, so please write between a minimum of 300. So between 300 and 650. The number of paragraphs is up to you, as long as you have introduction, a middle, and a conclusion. Are there any other questions? So one last time, remember to suggest you're just answering one of these things, so one question. You don't have to do all of them. And between 300 and 650 words. And when you send your essay, please let me know if you are okay with me sharing parts of it with the class, or if you do not want it to be used as an example. If I do use it, again, I will not have a name, so no one will know whose it is.
Kiana, I think somebody asked if it's possible to share the slides.
Yes.
Maybe they can just write to you individually to the same email. For those
Yeah,
interested.
just email me and I will send them to you. All right, so I believe that concludes our class. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I look forward to reading your essays and I will see you next week.
Thanks for joining, people.
See
We're
you
going to end
soon.
this meeting soon.
See you soon.
Any questions?
Bye bye.
Bye.
No question.
Okay.